Brian McLaren, in his book that I've quoted before, We Make the Road by Walking, says that most human societies are divided between the elites and the masses. The elites are that top 1% or 3% or 5% of the top who hoard all the money, the weapons, the power, the influence, the opportunities. They're the ones that make the rules. They're the ones that often rig the game in their favor. They forge alliances across all areas and sectors: the government, the business, religion, media, the military. And as a result, they have loyal allies, and they reward those allies to keep them loyal. Down at the bottom, writes McLaren, we find the masses, commonly called multitudes in the Gospels. And they provide the cheap labor. This is a system that's run by the elites. They work with little pay, little security, little prestige, little notice. To the elites, the multitudes can remain surprisingly invisible and insignificant most of the time. In the middle, between that handful of elites and the masses of the multitudes, we find those loyal allies who function as mediators between the few that are above them and the many who are below them. They live in hope that they or their children can climb up that pyramid, closer to the elites. But those who are above them generally don't want much competition from below, so they make sure that pyramid is not very easy to climb. These dynamics were at work in Jesus' day, and he was well aware of them. In his parables, Jesus constantly made heroes out of people among the multitudes: the day laborers, small farmers, women working in the home, slaves, even children. He captured the dilemma of what we would call middle management, the stewards, the tax collectors, and others, who extracted income from the poor and the powerless below them for the sake of the rich and powerful above them. And he exposed the duplicity and the greed of those at the top, especially the religious and civic leaders who enjoyed a cozy, lucrative alliance with the rich elites. In addressing the social realities of his day, Jesus constantly turned the normal dominance pyramid on its head, confusing even his disciples. That quote is from chapter 23. That analysis of society from Brian McLaren's book caused me to look a second time at the 3 dinner parties that Jesus attended in the Gospel of Luke, which Kathy Dempsey read for us this morning. I was looking for elites at the top, middle management stewards like tax collectors, and representatives of the multitude who make up the majority of people at the bottom of the pyramid. And here's what I found. For one thing, Jesus intentionally called tax collectors to join his movement. First, he did call simple fishermen, day laboring brothers like Simon Peter and Andrew, and the 2 Zebedee boys, James and John. But Luke tells us in today's first reading, after this, he, Jesus, went out and saw a tax collector named Levi sitting at the tax office. Now, Levi would be one of those middle management manager stewards, a tax gatherer either for Rome or for King Herod or for the temple. And Jesus said to him, "Follow me." And he, Levi, left everything, rose, and followed him. Well, that's really something when you think about it. According to the Life Application Bible, Levi left a lucrative, though probably dishonest, tax collecting business in order to follow Jesus. You see, Jews who were appointed by Rome to collect taxes from the citizens, the subjects, as well as from merchants passing through the town, they were expected to take a commission for themselves on the taxes that they collected. They got a portion, a percentage, that they got to set for themselves. They kept the profits. Tax collectors were thus hated by the Jews, both because of their reputation for cheating and for their support of the Roman Empire. When Jesus called Levi to join his movement, Levi jumped at the chance. I'm not sure, though, that it helped Jesus' reputation. Tax collectors were avoided, if possible, and not unlike Internal Revenue Service agents are today. You don't want that letter in your mailbox. Generally shunned. Merchants didn't like how the tariffs, the taxes, and the fees that were imposed by the government added to their cost of doing business. You know, governments used to love to impose tariffs and tolls and taxes, tariffs on imported items. Because when you have a tariff, they get to collect for themselves that 10% or that 25% extra charge that they are putting on every item coming in. They get to keep it. The person buying the item had to face the fact that it's going to cost all that much more out of their pocket now to buy it on the market. That's how tariffs work. Tariffs were built-in generators of price inflation. Happened then, happens now. And the government that imposed the tariffs got to keep all the money they collected. Hello! Imposing duties and tariffs are always bad news for customers, for consumers, for the economy of the masses and the multitudes. They hate them. It never works for them. But it is loved by the elites who collect them. But because a tariff is not called a tax, the elite, the governors, can get away with it. We didn't raise your taxes. See, tax collectors like Levi were hated because they were collecting tolls and tariffs on merchandise coming in and passing through. Furthermore, Jewish nationalists, called zealots, resented paying taxes and tribute to the Roman Empire because they occupied their land militarily and politically. And the enormous expense of King Herod's brand new, still being built temple in Jerusalem, it saddled the people with additional tax assessments. Can you say millage? It was hard enough to eke out a living in the harsh Middle East of Jesus' day. These taxes simply made things worse for the multitude. Common people were going bankrupt. The multitude had to carry the weight of debt generated by the elites. Now, we all know deep down we shouldn't blame the IRS agent for the high rate of taxes in America. Federal programs, income taxes, Social Security, FICA, payroll taxes, not to mention sales taxes, local business, property taxes, county assessments, millage, state mandates, all the rest of the fees and the fines that burden our financial lives. We shouldn't blame the IRS agent who collects it because the tax collector doesn't make those rules. Politicians do that. So take it up with your township or county supervisor, take it up with the state bureaucrats in Lansing, take it up with that giant sucking sound that comes out of Washington, D.C. that saddles our economy with $17 trillion of debt and a budget deficit this year alone of nearly $1 trillion more. Now, forgive me for sounding a bit cynical and political, but we just came through the annual State of the Union address this week with an hour and a half of standing ovations. But not one word was said about any of this tariff, taxation, or debt stuff, which is huge. Not a word. Can't applaud that. Now, granted, the Internal Revenue Service may have some unfair advantages in its legal and police powers, confiscatory policies, little-known clauses in the tax code that can trip up even the best-intentioned taxpayer. It's hard not to make a mistake with the volume of rules out there. But that doesn't make the IRS employee a collaborator. It's their job. Right, Dennis? It's a tough job. Somebody's got to do it. It's a thankless job. So Jesus probably raised some eyebrows when he extended an invitation to that government employee, that tax enforcer, Levi. He's also called Matthew in Greek, in case you wonder. Mattheos, Levi. He asked him to join him, be a disciple. And it looks like Levi was proud as punch to follow Jesus. He not only left his job, he called all his friends together so they could meet Jesus too. Luke tells us Levi held a reception for his fellow tax collectors and other so-called sinners so that they could meet Jesus in his own house. Levi, who may have left behind a material fortune, believes he's now on the road to gain a spiritual fortune. He was proud to be publicly associated with Jesus. And Luke writes, and I quote, Levi made him a great feast at his house, and there was a large company of tax collectors and others sitting at table with them. Well, here's the first of our 3 dinner parties. Let's see what happens at this first one. The Pharisees and their scribes murmured against Jesus' disciples, saying, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" And Jesus answered them, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick do. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance." So the scribes and the Pharisees were the respectable folks. They were the ones who made themselves appear good by doing good deeds in public, pointing out the sins of others. Always felt made them look better when you can point out somebody else's problems. The word Pharisee derives from the Hebrew verb upharsin, which means to divide, to separate. Pharisees were compulsive dividers. They separated the kosher from the unkosher, the clean from the unclean. They enforced purity codes and Sabbath laws, and they thought they could tell a saint from a sinner. And they separated